Could it be the perfect all-around lens for landscape photographers? Today, we are diving into the Sony 20-70mm f4G, a lens that promises an ultra-wide 20mm field of view, yet stretches all the way to 70mm, giving us flexibility without changing lenses. But here's the big question: is it really flexible or just trying to do too much? We're putting this lens to the test, checking out how it handles sharpness, contrast, distortion, and overall usability. Is it wide enough? Is 70mm really long enough? Does the f4 aperture limit its potential? Stay with us, because throughout the video, we'll show real-world sample shots, breaking down what works and what doesn't. And to make sure to watch till the end, whether you are a professional or enthusiast, we will give you our honest verdict on whether the Sony 20-70mm f4G earns a spot in your camera bag. What do you think about a zoom lens with a 20-70mm range? We believe this lens stands out because of its well-balanced focal range. We are all used to the standard 24-70mm zoom, but gaining an extra 4mm on the wide end is making this lens reach well in the 16-35 territory, and is a game changer for landscape photographers. It's equally important for travel photographers, offering more flexibility without the need to switch lenses. Are there any other lenses on the market with this range? Currently, it seems that Sony holds the crown with this focal length combination, making it the first of its kind. Or do you know of another lens manufacturer that has released a zoom lens with the same range? If so, let us know in the comments. Right out of the box, the Sony 20-70mm f4G feels solid. It's compact, lightweight, yet it has the premium Sony G series build. Perfect for landscape photographers who spend hours hiking with gear. Of course, we can't expect the same quality as the GM series. On the other hand, this lens, like the entire G line, is aimed at a wider photography audience, and weight is a big consideration here. For landscape and travel photographers, it's important that the lens is resistant to dust and moisture with a fluorine coated front element that repels dirt and water. Unless you are planning to take it deep-sea diving, this lens should handle shooting waterfalls or rain just fine. What really grabs our attention is that the lens starts at 20mm, as we mentioned already, offering an extra wide field of view compared to a typical 24-70mm zoom. It really makes a big difference for landscape photography. In one lens, we actually get 5 focal lengths that are commonly used in landscape photography, or at least 3 very popular, and 2 longer ones that are used less frequently but still useful. Specifically, 20mm 24-35 and the longer focal lengths of 50mm and 70mm. Here are a few photos that I took and mentioned focal lengths or very close to them, mostly during our expeditions. Now let's see if its performance matches our expectations. First, we will take a look at the zoom's focal range. Let's dive into the field of view test. We are especially interested in the difference between 20 and 24mm. As we can see, the 4mm difference on the wide end, while it might seem small at first glance, is quite noticeable, especially when shooting single shots. After all, that is nearly 17% difference. The question is how the lens performs in terms of quality at 20mm and whether the photos at this focal length will be usable without cropping. Let's move on to one of the most important tests, sharpness test. We have taken shots at the same key focal lengths, 20, 24, 35, 50 and 70mm, using apertures f4, 5.6, 8, 11 and 16. But from our previous videos, we know very well that we never shot at f16, and we also know why. We are looking closely at center sharpness. Is it tech sharp where it matters most? And edge-to-edge sharpness. How does it hold up in the corners, especially at 20mm? You can evaluate the sharpness as well as other tested aspects yourself by checking the raw files provided for download via the link below the video. Our conclusion is that even at the widest aperture f4 and focal length 20mm, the center sharpness is at a very good level. The extreme corners are slightly softer at 20mm, but still well usable. Compared to the previously tested Sony 24-50mm f2.8, the center sharpness at f4 and 24mm is practically the same, while the 20-70mm appears slightly sharper in the corners. Corner sharpness improves even further with longer apertures and reaches a surprisingly high level. Overall, the lens has pleasantly surprised us in terms of sharpness, especially at the wider focal lengths, where we are concerned about potential softness. Moving on to distortion. We expected certain level of barrel distortion at 20mm and some Pincushion at 70, usually with similar lenses. So what's the verdict? The lens exhibits quite noticeable barrel distortion at its widest focal length of 20mm. This distortion is particularly strong and non-linear, often referred to as a mustache pattern, which can be tricky to correct. While in-camera and software correction profiles can effectively minimize this issue, manual correction may still leave some residual distortion. It's also worth noting that this correction can result in a slight loss of micro-contrast and apparent sharpness, particularly towards the edges of the frame. At 70mm, the lens shows some mild Pincushion distortion, which is more linear and generally easier to correct. The built-in correction profiles handle it well, reducing distortion to an insignificant level in most real-world shooting situations. However, it should be noted that at 24mm and f4, the barrel distortion is better controlled on the 20-70mm lens compared to the Sony 24-50mm f2.8. So even in this aspect, the 20-70mm performs surprisingly better. Next up, flares and backlight. We shot directly into strong light sources to push it to its limits. Check out the lens flares, ghosting and contrast performance. Does it hold up well, or does it fall apart in harsh conditions? Let's take a closer look. The Sony 20-70mm lens exhibits a noticeable vignetting, particularly at its widest focal length of 20mm and when used at f4. This darkening of the corners is most prominent in the raw files, without any lens corrections applied. Stopping down to f5.6 or f8 significantly reduces the vignetting, making it less of an issue for most landscape photography scenarios. As you zoom in towards 70mm, the vignetting decreases and becomes minimal even at the wider apertures. When compared to the Sony 24-50 f2.8, the 20-70mm f4 shows slightly more pronounced vignetting at 20mm, which is expected given its wider field of view. However, at 24mm and beyond, the vignetting levels are quite similar between the two lenses. Interestingly, despite the 24-50mm having a faster f2.8 aperture, it manages vignetting fairly well when stopped down to f4, where it performs almost on par with the 20-70mm. In practical terms, both lenses exhibit typical vignetting, characteristic for zoom lenses, but nothing that can't be easily corrected in post-processing. The choice between them comes down to the focal range and aperture preferences, rather than significant differences in vignetting performance. For landscape photographers, filters are essential tools. So how does the Sony 20-70 handle them? The front element thread diameter is 72mm. After all, we didn't expect anything larger with an f4 aperture. It means that when it comes to screw-on filters, we are looking at the mid-range or lower mid-range pricing. Unlike most 24-70mm f2.8 zoom lenses, which typically have an 82mm thread, requiring significantly more expensive filters. We stacked more filters to check how many we can use before vignetting becomes an issue at the widest angle, which is crucial for long exposures. Overall, the lens handles filters surprisingly well, with minimal vignetting even when stacking, making it flexible for landscape photography. While autofocus speed and precision are not crucial for landscape photography, it still affects the overall usability of the lens. Its dual XD motors perform as expected, well, like any other G-series lens, more than sufficient for daily life usage along with your landscape photography hobby. The Aperture has 9 blades that provide solid bokeh, however, with f4 there is not much of bokeh in general. 9 blades creates 18-point stars in the light sources. That might be overwhelming in some busy night cityscapes, but 9 blades is almost becoming a standard nowadays, so there is not much of a choice, except my trusted Luxia. But it's something to keep in mind. This lens has also video in mind, and another feature worth mentioning is that it has correction of focus breathing. That is the slight change of focal length while focusing. Again, completely irrelevant for landscapes, but it adds value if you also want to use the lens for vlogs from your expedition with us, or just video content in general. Here is our verdict. Pros: super flexible focal range, 20-70mm. Compact and lightweight, great for travel. Impressive sharpness in the center and solid edges. Almost excellent image quality. Ability to use screw-on filters with a relatively small 72mm thread size. Sealed against dust and moisture. Cons: f4 might feel limiting for some situations. Due to its f4 aperture, this lens is not ideal for astrophotography, as it would require significantly increasing ISO and make it challenging to achieve precise focus on stars. Slight edge softness at a wider focal length. Some distortion and vignetting in the corners, especially at 20mm. What personally bothers me is that the lens extends when zooming. Yes, I know, this isn't a flaw. It's completely normal even in much more expensive zoom lenses. But personally, I just don't like it. So take this con as purely my subjective opinion. Price. The official retail price in Europe doesn't seem particularly low. However, with a bit of googling, it's easy to find authorized dealers currently, as of February 2025, offering this lens for around Euros 1300. And in my opinion, that's a completely reasonable price. When listing the pros and cons, let's also mention that the lens doesn't have optical stabilization. However, this is absolutely irrelevant for landscape photography, since the foundation of capturing landscapes is a tripod, and once again a tripod. Moreover, Sony has been increasingly focusing on improving in-body stabilization, which continues to get better and better with each new camera release. So, would I personally buy this lens? No, I wouldn't. And why should I? I've been shooting with prime lenses for years. But let's reframe the question. Would I recommend this lens to participants on my photography expeditions? Yes. If someone is just starting out with landscape photography, prioritizing weight or looking for a more budget-friendly and flexible zoom lens, then the 20-70mm f4G is certainly an interesting option. Compared to 24-70mm, it offers an additional 4mm on the wide end, which makes a noticeable difference in landscape photography. It's true that the lens shows the most optical flaws at 20mm, particularly blur distortion and vignetting. However, with in-camera correction enabled or post-processing adjustments, these issues are largely eliminated. Honestly, this lens appeals to me more than the recently tested Sony 24-50mm f2.8G. Also, let's mention that it would be fantastic to see this lens in a faster f2.8G version. Why hasn't Sony made it? Likely due to the changes of balancing size, weight, and optical performance. A lens with this range and an f2.8 aperture would probably be significantly larger and heavier with a much bigger front element. Would the Sony 20-70mm f4G be your go-to landscape lens? Share your opinions in the comments. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. We've got more lens reviews, field tests and photography challenges coming up. Until next time, happy shooting!
By the way, have you heard that you can join us on our exclusive photography expeditions to Lofoten and Iceland? If you want to know more, check the link below.